I am often looking for validation from someone else who has already bought from that company, who can share their experience and whether or not they're having success. Like, is what they bought providing the solution to the problem that they had? And so I think storytelling helps lend so much credibility because you're hearing from a peer versus the organization telling you how great it is.
Welcome to the State of Customer Storytelling. My guest today is Nick Venturella. Nick is an award-winning advocate marketer, and when he's not doing advocate marketing, he's also a musician entrepreneur. Seriously, you should check him out. He has an amazing business upcycling guitars. More on that later, but he's currently the customer engagement operations manager at Ceridian, which is a global human capital management software company with about over 6,000 employees. So it's quite a large company. And Nick is responsible for their customer engagement and advocacy program. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Sam. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Excited to chat. And why don't we just start it off and let's talk about, customer advocacy and if someone, isn't really familiar with customer advocacy, because on one hand, it's a long-standing practice, but it does feel like it's gaining. We're in a bit of a renaissance right now, and in many respects as well. So, if someone isn't familiar with customer advocacy, let's start it off. Just tell us a little bit about like what is customer advocacy, and most importantly, why does it matter so much?
Yeah, I would say one of the easiest ways maybe to think about customer advocacy, especially for anyone who's maybe not familiar with that terminology. I think more people are probably familiar with like word of mouth marketing, which is essentially, I always use the movie analogy. Like I saw a movie on Netflix, totally loved it. Thought of a friend who I has similar interests, probably would like it. I tell them about it, they go watch it. That's word of mouth marketing happening as an example. So so in terms of advocacy and how that relates to a business is it's really the discipline of building word of mouth marketing and fostering brand loyalty among customers at scale. Essentially, it's using mechanisms and things to really do that on a large basis with lots of customers kind of all moving in a direction where they have brand loyalty and they're talking about what's good and sometimes not so good, but that's real, which is also important. But the idea is to foster enough advocates who talk about the positive things over the negative things, and that wins out. So you can think of like Apple computers as a company that has fanatics, that wait in line for the next gadget and whatever else, and it's really about them and what it means to them, and they're willing to promote and advocate on behalf of that brand because they love the product so much. And that's really the idea, is that you're fostering a relationship with customers that's mutually beneficial and a partnership with them to the point that they want to sing your praises and talk about what you do to other people they know or others in a counterpart kind of role, who might be looking to make a purchase decision from maybe your company or something. So I think that's kind of the key. It's brand loyalty and fostering word of mouth marketing sort of at scale and getting it to a point where customers who choose to advocate on behalf of a brand are choosing to do it because they want to, not because they're necessarily rewarded or anything like that. But there's some authenticity in that.
I love that. And there's so much to unpack there. One thing I want to drill down into is that the customer kind of storytelling segment of advocacy, right? So it sounds like to me, um, you know, customer advocacy is a large, encompassing kind of umbrella term, and customer stories are one part of customer advocacy. Um, yeah, can you tell tell me a little bit more about that? Like, how do you see that, and how do you see, customer stories within the advocacy umbrella, and what are the other, some of the other key, kind of buckets, if you will, that you also think about?
Absolutely. I kind of look at it this way. I'll step back for a second. So I think of like customer marketing and advocacy as kind of an overall marketing discipline, if you will. It's a certain skill set. It takes a certain focus. It's a little bit different than, say, like account-based marketing, ABM marketing, or like lead gen marketing. It has aspects of all of those in it as a broad umbrella term, but the focus is really to be customer centric, to grow and build advocates over time, to essentially help your customers be successful so that they want to advocate on behalf of your brand. And so storytelling absolutely is a key element within that, and is necessary, because what it does is it provides credibility for your brand, because it is another customer who is like, if I'm in the market to potentially make a purchase, whether it's B2C or B2B, doesn't really matter. I am often looking for validation from someone else who has already bought from that company, who can share their experience and whether or not they're having success. Like, is what they bought providing the solution to the problem that they had? And how well is it doing that? How good was the experience in all of that, in terms of the purchase process, and then eventually it actually solving your problem? And so I think storytelling helps lend so much credibility, because you're hearing from a peer versus the organization telling you how great it is, which they're obviously biased because they made the product or the service or whatever. So that's where storytelling, I think, becomes critical and crucial. And the way to, like, if you have a sales force, sellers on your team whose job it is to try to go and make sales, they need ways to help communicate to prospect customers that is authentic and that lends credibility, because the salesperson can say all they want, but today, in today's day and age, with the internet available, there's so many places people can do all their own self-sufficient research before they ever talk to a salesperson. So they've essentially sold themselves before they actually engage with your organization. And it's more like, what proof points can you share with me, AKA stories from customers having success, that can help push me over the edge to make that purchase decision? So that's where I think storytelling fits for sure within the customer advocacy realm. So I'll pause there. If you need me to add anything, you just let me know.
Oh, yeah, I love that. And you mentioned working with your sales force and your sales team, your sales leaders, and even the reps. Tell me more about that, because I kind of feel like, there's always these silos to some extent between, sales and even like traditional marketing. And I would imagine there's also there can be silos in between, advocate marketing and customer advocacy leaders and sales. I'm curious, like, what's your take on that? And kind of like, if you can share anything that you've learned around like best practices around like getting alignment between those two departments, when, as you said, it's, from a pure, like, time to value ROI perspective, like getting these customer stories in the hands of the sales team at the right time with the right deals, like, that it seems like one of the clearest like ROI indicators, right? Tell me more, like, what have you learned there, and how do you see that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I would say is there's always going to be differences of opinion. This is just my own thoughts. It's not to say what works for our organization maybe works for everybody else, but I will say that I think if you step back and look at essentially the reasons why and the psychology around customer stories and working with the salespeople, I guess the way I would say is to position it to help get alignment is come to the sales organization from like a customer advocacy or marketing or even customer success department to propose collaboration internally with sales, in the way that in this way. I am here as to work for you, salesperson, in the sense that if you help collaborate with me and we can build a good relationship, I can help provide the right kinds of customers to be a reference for you, or to provide a testimonial or some sort of video, customer video, that can help you sell. And a lot of salespeople are, commission driven, or at least that's the nature of their role. Is, they tend to get paid when they get the company paid, in terms of purchases that are close won deals. So positioning it in a way that you're helping them, like, this is to help you do your job better. So we need to break down silos and collaborate more cohesively. And ultimately what that will do is the salespeople start to win more if you're able to provide those customer testimonials and stories and things that help them win. You can present a clear ROI from a customer advocacy standpoint, which maybe helps you get more budget to expand that operation. Sales increase, which is good. Now you have new customers that can come through the advocacy pathway, to become an advocate, which means now we can then capture those stories, if we can help those customers be successful, to now have more customer stories to share back with sales. So I think really mapping out how it benefits sales is the short answer. So they can really see the value in what it is customer advocacy is actually doing for their role. And sales is a high pressure kind of a role. So I'm not saying it's the highest pressure or any more pressure than, say, advocacy, marketing, or any of that kind of thing. It's just different. And the nature of it is such that they have to be on top of hitting numbers all the time. We kind of all do in certain respects, but it's their livelihood. And so if you can come at it in a way that helps them understand that you're there to help them do more of that, they're likely more willing to be reciprocal and collaborate. And it's I don't say that to give any sales organizations a bad rap whatsoever. Furthest thing from the truth. Totally necessary. And I've managed salespeople and I've worked with salespeople before. So it's but it always works better when we're on the same page and collaborating, for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so it also sounds like as customer marketers, advocate marketers, would you say that the first step, most likely has to be taken by us as advocate marketers? Is that fair to say? Because otherwise, sales is just going to be heads down, like trying to hit their numbers, like, right? But yeah, what's your take on that?
Yeah. I mean, to the extent you can make it a more holistic kind of approach with sales, it's kind of a broad question in the sense that if I'm an advocate marketer in a company, I don't know, am I in a leadership role as an advocate marketer, or am I, more on a practitioner and I have a boss and whatever else, and maybe it's I need to get backup from my boss so that the message is actually heard when I cross departments to make an ask of the sales team, or ask for collaboration or whatever else. So, I mean, ideally, it would come from the top down, this kind of idea of collaboration, not just between advocate marketing and sales, but across a whole organization. Everybody needs to collaborate in a positive way for the organization to be successful. So I think if it can come from the top down, that's ideal. And then that makes it easier for anyone to sort of insert, hey, this is the executive vision of how we work together internally. Let's all get on board and let's make some positive things happen. But if that's not the case, I would say too, probably the best thing you can do is get the buy-in of at least one person. Like if you're an individual advocate marketer and you've got a good rapport with a particular salesperson, and you can say, hey, what kind of deals are you working on? What kind of things do you need from customer stories? And if you can go and source a few of those, basically start with a small experiment, source a few of those, see how it works, prove it out. Then if you prove it out, they get some sales, they get their commissions. Your praises are going to be sung a little bit farther and wider than they were previously. And that's just how you build momentum. And that's kind of how you start from the ground up, especially if you don't have higher leadership buy-in, and it's coming from the top down. But ideally, it's going in both directions.
I love that point, and also, getting the recognition, right? Because like we're all sort of you know in our own careers, like our own, it's like the startup of you, right? You have to kind of figure out how to progress and promote and drive value and kind of get noticed. And it seems like it seems like what you're saying is like a really quick win for an advocate marketer is like, and yes, ideally it comes top down, but if an advocate marketer is listening, if they can do like a gap analysis, figure out where the gaps are in customer stories by talking to the sales team, facilitate getting a couple quick wins, producing those customer stories that are kind of missing strategically, and then the results will be there, and then it's great. It's great branding for you and great results for the org. Is that
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I feel like so much in the corporate world, and not really just corporate world. That's just a lot of my experience. I'm just saying, in general, you kind of have to prove it before people start really paying attention. Like the infomercials where everything's in black and white and someone's fumbling with something, and then all of a sudden the picture's in color now and there's a solution. And it's like, okay, you just proved to me that this product works, or that's the idea. As you were talking, even if you aren't in a position to do it all yourself, if you can do that kind of a gap analysis to see where there's a gap, and even just present and propose a plan for a small experiment to help with that gap to, say, your supervisor, and get their buy-in, now you might have a little bit more backing to make something happen, or at least execute on that small experiment and prove it out. And then from there, hopefully you have a good relationship with a supervisor and whatnot. If that works, now that supervisor can tell their supervisor, because everybody's got every boss has a boss or whatever, until you get all the way up to the chain. And then, if it's proving out, maybe then some of the momentum starts to come back down from the executive level to say, hey, I think we need to double down on this or triple down on this.
I want to ask you about how customer storytelling and kind of customer advocacy priorities perhaps shift depending on the size and the stage of the company. In the past couple of years, it seems like more customer marketers, more advocate marketers are roles are being created than ever. And what used to be very very enterprise only, like it's slowly but surely like getting down into mid-market. Smaller companies are focusing more on advocacy, when it used to be very much like, oh, we don't need to worry about that until we're an enterprise company. So like, that's my understanding. And so if you think that is the case, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, how does it change? How does customer advocacy change, depending on the kind of the size and the stage of the company, particularly like what can like smaller or, SMEs or, startups even like learn from the, customer advocacy that has traditionally been executed at the enterprise level?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I truly believe that it has started kind of, well, and it makes some sense with enterprise level organizations that can afford to build out teams to do this sort of work. Whereas a startup or a small business, you might have 1 to 10 people, or maybe it's a 50-person small business. But they probably have one person who's doing marketing, and that person might even be doubling as a salesperson or something like that. So just the bandwidth of people is usually spread a little bit more thinly than in a larger organization where you have individuals who might specialize in particular areas. I'll again give kind of a state of, I think, the recent years and the spotlight that's been put on customer advocacy and customer marketing. So as COVID hit, I think a lot of times what happened there was many businesses and their economies to keep their own business alive and well started to shift and change as a result of the pandemic. And so I think what a lot of organizations, and unfortunately a lot of organizations, lost a lot of business because they couldn't be open or whatever else. And so they lost the opportunity for new customers and new dollars to flow through their organization from new sales. But what it did do is it put a focus on, oh, I have this pool of current customers that if I can retain them, especially in like a SaaS business where it's recurring revenue, that recurring revenue could help keep things afloat until we can figure out a pivot or whatever needs to happen to move the business forward in a new direction based on economic circumstances. And so I think that was a natural, well, an unnatural phenomenon, I guess, that nobody saw coming, but it was a natural reaction maybe to that happening. And so people started to double down and triple down on their current customers and realizing that, hey, it's easier to keep a customer than get a new customer. And my current customer isn't fully using all of the offerings that we have. So now I can focus on upsell, cross-sell, and probably land those sales a little bit easier than trying to find brand new sales. And so I think that's where this more recent focus in the last couple of years on customer marketing, you're starting to see like tons and tons of organizations have these kinds of roles available, and not just in B2B, but B2C and other organizations. So to your point, to your question, and it is a lot of larger organizations, but more and more smaller organizations are seeing what the larger organizations are doing and saying, oh, that looks like it's useful and is making sense, and I should probably be doing some level of that. So then that's the question. So how do I do that at a smaller scale with effectiveness if essentially my goal is to, among my customers, scale this idea of brand loyalty and word of mouth marketing? And I think for a smaller business, it's a matter of just kind of picking some things that work. I think there are some principles that are sort of universal. Most customers want to have success with whatever product or service you're offering as quickly as possible. That's part of why they're buying. So helping them onboard really well to be able to use your product and have success with it right away, and essentially validate their decision to purchase from you with time to value, as they go through that. So I would say make sure that is working. Like, your customers are just getting the value that you've promised them from what you sell. And then from there, I think you can start to insert some things that are more of a customer advocacy kind of nature. And it could be as easy as a customer community, and it doesn't have to necessarily be fancy. I'm all about, like, there are great tools that can automate and do all sorts of great things, but there are also basic tools that, if you have a good strategy on how you use them, can be effective. So, a Facebook community, a LinkedIn community, or whatever, of just your customers, so they can start to interact and answer questions of each other, of their peers, and you can insert, valuable information to them, share some of the other customer success stories that are happening, because a lot of customers want to understand, well, what is that customer doing? They're having success. What are they doing with your product that I'm not doing, that maybe I'm missing out on the same kind of success? So I think there are little things like that. And then as an advocate marketer, as those community and those interactions are taking place among peers, how can you capture some of that and leverage some of that for the business? Or how can sales then take some of those positive comments and whatever else and insert them in their talk track as they're selling to a prospect? And that just all starts to build on itself. So I think from a smaller organization's standpoint, it's finding one or two areas where you can think through, how does this benefit the customer? And that's probably the key. Keep customer centric. How do I benefit the customer first to help them be successful in whatever they do, without even necessarily mentioning your product? But how can I help them be successful? How can I specifically help them be successful with our product? And then from there, how can I recognize them? So that's the other side of it, is once they have success as an organization, how can you put them on a pedestal to recognize them and make them feel good that they made the right decision and have some success? So I think even an email list can kind of do that. It's not quite as back and forth interactive as like a community or a forum, but just regularly reaching out and doing shout outs of your customers. Be like, hey, Joe Schmo had awesome success with this last week. We saw it in the news. Congratulations. Keep on keeping on. You're doing the best thing. And I mean, that just sort of hits people's as an individual. They people want to be recognized. They want to stand out for doing positive things and being successful in their roles. And then if they're successful as an individual, the company they work for is going to see that success, and it's going to have a trickle effect there. And then you and your organization get some recognition by association because of their success. But you got to put that focus on them. So I'll pause there. That was a long-winded answer with a lot in it, but I hope that helps a little bit.
I love that. One of the big takeaways for me, and even for us at Testimonial Hero, is progress, not perfection, right? Like you can get a ton done with just a like a lightweight kind of customer advisory board that's purely remote kind of situation, like whether it's email, LinkedIn groups. I love that. We talked about strategy earlier, and I want to circle back to that. We talked a little bit about gap analysis, but is it that simple? Or how do you think about it? Like, if I'm a marketer listening to this, I've decided that I want to, and specifically for customer stories. So I've decided I want to create 4, 5, 6, 10 more customer stories. How do you think about setting and determining a customer story strategy?
If you have historical data at all, like if you've done some level of this in the past, that can be really helpful as just a baseline understanding. Now, if you're starting from scratch, you've never done it before, you don't really have a strategy around customer stories, then it might take some creative thinking. And in that case, I mean, I guess the way I would start is in your organization, talk to those folks who have the probably the best relationships with the customers. So maybe it's customer success reps, if you're like in a software organization, or maybe it is an account executive or a sales rep even. I mean, it could be any one of those people who engage on the front lines with customers on a regular basis. They'll be able to tell you of those interactions that they have, which customers really stand out as sort of having the right mindset for your brand, if that makes sense. I don't know really how else to explain that, but they'll be able to have enough information and enough of a relationship with the customer to be able to say, you know what, this customer might actually fit for a customer testimonial for what you're thinking of. So understanding who among your customer base, like doing some sort of analysis to say, like, who would be most likely? Like, who would our sales or CSMs nominate as ideal customers to represent our brand to other prospect customers or other current customers, even for that matter? So I think that's a place to start, especially if you're a smaller business and you're on a small scale. You're probably closer to the customers. You probably know who they are more so than a larger organization personally. So I would start there and then just get an idea of those kinds of customer stories and then what you want to focus on. So this is where the strategy comes into play. So look at your organization, where the organization's going. What are their goals? Where do they want to go in terms of sales? Are they looking to break into a particular industry or segment? And do you have any current customers that are happy and successful enough with your product that are in those industries or segments that you could start to build essentially a roster of who you would like to approach for that? But again, you have to when you do finally approach a customer, you have to make it worth their while and beneficial. So one of the ways I think about that is those who often want to speak as in testimonials or at a conference or whatever on behalf of their experience with your product typically are people who care about their personal brand for their career purposes. And so this is an opportunity to add that feather and recognition in their cap on their journey. So I think that kind of appeals, that kind of recognition. That's one of the go-to ways that we appeal to a lot of people. Instead of asking them, we want to present them, with the opportunity to have another experience that showcases them as an expert and a thought leader in their industry and with this particular product, that they can use and leverage for their own personal brand and career. And so it's targeting in on that individual. And again, if they're having success, their employer who hires them is likely to enjoy that positive success as well. And then you, by association, uh, them using your product. So I kind of spun around in a few different topics, but it's all a little bit related. So I can drill into any area you'd like.
Yeah, I love the kind of shining the spotlight on them, kind of celebrating their success. And actually, let's dig into that. One of the challenges all marketers face when we're going for that advocacy ask is the way we make the ask. Also, getting agreement, right? And any tips you can share, so we have one tip, which is like, first of all, ask the right people. Secondly, help make it beneficial to them, make it a two-way exchange of value, and let them know or kind of hint at, like, look, we're going to promote this. We want to, hold you up as a kind of a beacon, or as a example of best practices in your industry, help their personal brand. What other kind of tips or, things have you realized around like actually making that ask and getting that agreement?
Yeah, I think more than anything, the biggest aspect of it, there's no big trick to it. It's being authentic in what you're doing and being very transparent with the customer. So most customers can, have good, I'll just call it BS detectors, and so if you're being inauthentic about it in your ask, or you're trying to sort of hide what what your real angle is, in terms of why you're asking, then I think that comes through usually, and customers might be more apprehensive to participate. But I definitely think that transparency is hugely useful and unfortunately sometimes underrated. But that's one of the biggest things I would say is like, hey, here's why we're doing this. Here's what we're looking for. And here's how we would go about doing that. This is an opportunity for you and your thought leadership if you care about your personal brand and career, like if that's a motivator for you. If it's not, then maybe this isn't the right opportunity for you, and that's okay. And we value your partnership and your business and want you to feel comfortable working with us. So if this isn't the right thing, and I think that's key too, is making sure your customers they're not pressured into it, that it's their choice. It's totally their choice. Because as soon as you start to feel pressured into it, your heart might not be into it, or you might feel like it's just an obligation. And that's what starts to lead to burnout. If you then come back to that person and keep asking these same customers over and over to be a reference customer or add a testimonial or a customer video or something like that. And then they get burnt out, and then they get a bad taste in their mouth from your organization. And now they're less likely to really be an advocate for you, and you've just kind of turned them away. So it's got to be to their benefit, transparency, and I think too, just allowing people, you're presenting the opportunity. They can choose to take it, they can choose not to take it, and that's totally fine. In fact, that kind of endears them a little bit more to you because you're being human.
So many good points there, and just to underscore, the point about explaining kind of like what you're doing and why. I think other than good communication and being, like you said, transparent, there actually is a very good psychological reason to do that as well. There was just short tangent here. There's this study called the copy machine study. I think it's in a book of Robert Cialdini, but basically it's this idea that like when we ask someone to do us a favor, if we provide a reason, people are just significantly more, they're going to agree, just because people like to have reasons for what they do, right? So for example, it could be like for us, when we always, when we make an advocacy ask for like something like a G2 review or something, we're like, we explain to them like, this is extremely helpful to us, and like our salespeople use our G2 page on every single deal. and like no big deal, but if you're open to that, I'd really appreciate it. So like, yeah, having that, explaining like the because, or just like the reason, and like just being transparent, and is a lot more appealing than being like just asked, with no further context.
Yeah, I'll add to your G2 example there real quick. One of the things that I found effective too is similar to what you just explained. Like, hey, this is why we're asking. This is why what we're after if you choose to do this. But I often will share it back with the customer too, and say, this is also, if paying forward the experiences you've had is a value to you, that's part of how this helps other people who were, if you remember back when you were shopping for a solution, maybe you reviewed G2 and Trust Radius and all these other review sites. If you had a good experience, or really even if you didn't have a great experience, not that you're trying to promote bad testimonials, but just, you don't tell them what to write, but just like getting them to understand that, hey, the act of putting in a review actually helps others who might have been in the same situation you were in when you were shopping. So it just kind of personalizes some of that a little bit further.
That is such a good point. And I want to hit on a couple of things. I know we have a hard stop coming up. So let's shift to talk about different mediums, different formats of customer stories, video, text, third-party reviews. How do you think about all of those, and maybe, the pros and cons of each, and kind of where things are going and trends in, efficacy?
Yeah. So, well, the first thing I think about is the appropriate media and the appropriate sort of medium to create the messaging for that media. So in other words, a basic example. So if I need to do some sort of postcard advertising that's going to get actually physically mailed to someone, obviously I'm probably not using video. I'm probably using copywriting, text, imagery, still imagery, something that conveys something that's appropriate for that particular use in that particular media. So in contrast, if I'm trying to do something on social media, I'm probably looking at some sort of native content, meaning we're posting maybe a short video native within a LinkedIn feed, uploaded right to LinkedIn versus like on YouTube and linking to it, or whatever the case is. And in that case, video and short text is probably a better choice than long form text, unless your goal is to draft like a blog post where you're looking to get search engine optimization benefit from a long form, 1,000+ word document. So kind of knowing where you're going to use the content or the stories that you're producing will help dictate what's appropriate for the audience that tends to view in those places. So you want to go where your audience is, and you want to utilize a format in those places that is accepted by the audiences who go to those places. Online and social, it tends to be short, sweet, snappy video, lots of excitement, entertainment. If you're an article reader and you like blog posts and whatever else, long form. If you're doing other advertising, again, it's probably short copy if it's text at all, depending on what the outcome needs to be for the audience. So that's kind of the way I think about it from a format standpoint. Where things are going in advocacy, I think so much more these days is, well, it's online and offline experiences for sure. We've always had conferences in person and things, and then COVID hit, and then now we had all these virtual things, and now we're kind of coming out of that to a certain extent, and it's kind of this virtual hybrid, in-person and virtual version of things. So it's a little bit of everything, and I think that can be to an advantage for advocacy marketers and things like that, because you can create an in-person experience that has a different kind of meaningful value to a customer than a virtual experience that can also have a very meaningful value to a customer, but the format of how you have to deliver that It just has to be different. So in some ways it makes our job maybe a little more complicated and harder because we have to manage all these formats and things. But if you do it well, you can kind of stack these things on each other, and the reach you end up getting is greater. And also I think communities, or some idea of community on or offline, probably both, is very much where things are going. And one of the reasons that's so important is because people want to belong to a group or a tribe, or something that has a sense of camaraderie and a sense of something bigger than themselves. And what happens, I think, when you get a group of people like that together, especially customers, is now it takes on a third sort of dynamic, which is that you've got the company and the customer, and they're interacting two ways. That's the two dynamics. The third dynamic is now they've got peers in the group, so now they can interact with each other, and now they're starting to learn from each other without the company, and that brings so much more value. So I a lot of that is all here already. I just think it's going to expand and become a lot more important, and you're going to see a lot more of it.
Yeah, I love that. Such a true thing. Last but not least, Nick, what do you wish you knew 5 years ago around customer advocacy, customer stories, or anything related to that?
I don't know. I was pretty excited when this opportunity came up for me at Ceridian. I was pretty excited. I had been doing like more social media marketing and content marketing and inbound kind of marketing, and I could see where this was going. And to me, it was like, the way I associated it was, I was like, okay, this is inbound 4.0. This is like amazing. So like 5 years ago, what would I want to know? I think I would have told myself, or anyone getting into it, don't be apprehensive about it. I think I had some insecurities about it initially because not a lot of people were, or it wasn't as widely popular as it is now. And so you always start to feel a little bit insecure. Like, am I on the right path? Am I doing the right kinds of things? How do I know this is where things are going? When you feel like you're a little bit of the underdog, or that's not the main thing. But the way to counter that, or the way I felt like I was able to counter that, was by concentrating on, okay, this is what I'm working on. This is what we've committed to in terms of trying to make this work. If we can prove this out, then we're proving, at least for our organization, that it's working. And then we can continue to do that. Maybe it's not right for every organization. That's fine. But this is where I'm at right now, and I have the opportunity to make this work. So let's see if we can make this work. And it turned out it worked pretty well, and it continues to work. And I'm very grateful. But I think that would be the biggest thing, is just a better way to get over the insecurities of not having mass mainstream exception of what you're doing at the moment.
And so you've heard it here, folks. If you have any doubts around, customer marketing, customer stories, and advocacy, you're in the right place. Nick, this has been great. Really appreciate this. We might have to have a round two sometime. Where can people get in touch with you if they want to connect, or just learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say LinkedIn is really the best way to do that. So it's linkedin.com/in/Nick V. So I was pretty early on LinkedIn, so I got the whole just last initial, not my whole name. So LinkedIn is the best way to get a hold of me. But we can email, we can message. Happy to expand, circle of network. So happy to talk to anybody.
Perfect. Nick, thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.
You too, Sam. Thanks so much.
All right, folks. Well, that was a fantastic episode with Nick Venturella. Just, wow, jam-packed with, so many insights there, from how to think about strategy, getting agreements, how advocacy and stories change different size companies. So yeah, I definitely encourage everyone to connect with Nick, follow him. He's got a great blog. And also, if you're a musician, he's got a really fantastic, Etsy shop selling upcycled guitars. Definitely check that out. And if there's any other guest in the future that you would want to have on the podcast, feel free to shoot me an email. It's sam@testimonialhero.com. We just want to make this the best or, extremely valuable podcast for customer storytelling and advocacy marketing. So with all that being said, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.